Chapter 16. Whispers in the Wind. Ferry loved the quiet afternoons at home. If he wasn't doing his homework at Ben's, he would be staying home with his mother. In the small sitting room where it always smelled like biscuits, and warmth came from the smouldering fire in the fireplace, Ferry felt the happiest. He used to spend the afternoons drawing. That afternoon, however, he wasn't in the mood for it. He had other things on his mind. "Mum, what do you think about lavender sky?" His mother frowned, as always, at Ferry's peculiar question. She took off her glasses. "So you've met her," she said with a sigh. "There isn't much to say. She's the oldest person in town. Nobody knows much about her. Maybe the older people who lived in the village before the town was built might have known more. She comes to town every now and then, to buy groceries. Sometimes I see her picking up branches from the sides of the roads. But never from the forest, if I come to think of it. I never thought how odd this was, not until now," she said, lost in thought. "But why does she cover her face? And why isn't she talking?" His mother shrugged. "I wouldn't know, all I know is just hearsay. People are talking, you know. That she was hurt in a great fire many years ago, and that her face was badly burnt. As for her not talking, I don't think anyone ever talked to her. Maybe that's why we thought she couldn't talk. And maybe she became a mute because of the trauma from the fire. Who knows? And people, well, people are afraid of things they don't understand. I believe that's why they've been avoiding her the whole time." Ferry felt sorry for the old lady. "So no one is visiting? Ever?" "Well, as far as I know, some women from the church paid her a visit a while ago. They were worried because no one had seen her in a while. That was many years ago, before you were born. So they decided they should check on her. And then..." His mother stopped, trying to find the right words. Ferry was on the edge of his seat. "And then? You see, it's hard to believe what people are saying," she said. "That's why you mustn't believe everything you hear, darling." "What about the church ladies? Did they talk to her?" "The church ladies did find her. As for talking to her, they were too frightened to speak, too terrified about what they saw." "What did they see?" Ferry asked, his heart ticking. Eileen fussed in her rocking chair. "Well, it was a long time ago. We've just moved to town, your father and I. But the news traveled fast, especially in a small town. What the church ladies thought they saw was hard to believe. They said they went to the old woman's house, and they were amazed by the beautiful flowers and plants growing in her garden. They've never seen such plants before. But what startled them was Lavender Sky herself. They called her, knocked at her door, but no one answered. Then they found her in the back garden and she was floating. She was actually floating in the air, above the fountain in the middle of the garden. She was muttering some words in a strange language. Butterflies, bugs, and birds were gathered around her, making a terrible noise. When she finally saw the church women, she simply vanished. You can imagine the terror those women went through. They left the garden as fast as they could. When they came back to town, a meeting took place immediately. The word witchcraft was on everybody's lips. It was then decided some of the most courageous men in town should pay a visit to the old lady. Without further delay, the men started to the veiled lady's house. They came back rather quickly. They hadn't seen anything suspicious. The house was actually a hut, surrounded by weeds and wild shrubberies. Not a trace of the wonderful garden. They eventually found the old lady dozing in her rocking chair. They've tried to talk to her, but couldn't understand a word of her mumbling and her meaningless gestures. So they decided to let her be. The ladies from the church, well, it was a common thing that every Thursday afternoon they played bridge. They also loved to have one or several glasses of brandy during the game, each. And that particular day was a Thursday. As for the old lady, We have rarely seen her since. Nobody really knows how she has survived so far. I'm actually surprised she's still alive. She must be over 100 years old." Ferry could barely breathe. He too had seen the strangely beautiful garden. He had seen the birds and bugs and heard their noise. He'd seen the whirlwind of leaves and flowers. And he wasn't the only one. Does she have children? Is anyone else living with her? Ferry asked in a low voice. "Not that I know of," his mother said, a shade of frown on her face. "Her children, they are probably old themselves. At her age, she should have grandchildren or great-grandchildren. And I don't recall anyone living with her. But you mustn't be afraid. She's just an old woman. A sad, lonely, old woman." Ferry couldn't get the veiled lady out of his mind, no matter what. If he closed his eyes, he could clearly see her lean figure, her face hidden behind the thick veil, and her long, thin fingers in lace gloves. He saw her for real, however, one foggy morning as he was going to school. She was watching him, motionless, from the other side of the road. The moment he noticed her, he broke into a run and didn't stop until he reached school. He almost stumbled when he saw her again, just as motionless, on the other side of the school, only minutes later. How did she get there so fast? Ferry was a rather fast runner. A lady her age could barely walk, let alone run. And for a second, Ferry thought maybe the old woman was a real witch, after all. Soon their encounters occurred more often. He would meet her on the street when he went to Ben's. He could see her watching him during the school break, quietly sitting outside the school gate. He would see her when he came back from school too. One day, he even met her at the grocery store. Ferry was accompanying his mother for the Sunday meal shopping. As Mrs. Donovan was asking the grocer for some beef, butter, and flour, the bell on the door rang, announcing a new customer. The chatter of all 9 customers in the grocery store that day suddenly stopped. They all stepped aside, making room for someone. And that someone was the very Mrs. Lavender Sky. But she wasn't heading to the store's shelves as usual. She walked slowly, but with a firm pace, towards the counter where Ferry and his mother were chatting with the grocer. It was so quiet in the store, they could hear all the dusty folders of her purple dress rustling. The veiled lady stopped so close to Ferry, he could feel her fresh scent of moss. No one moved, waiting. The old lady leaned in, as in slow motion, and, through the thick veil, she whispered in Ferry's ear. That was the moment his mother woke up, as from a nightmare, snatched her son away from the strange creature, and almost dragged him out of the store. "Maybe she's following you because you stole her feathers," said Ben when Ferry told his friends about the odd encounter. "Maybe she wants them back." "I don't think she wants that," said Ferry. "Besides, she was the one who gave them to me. Maybe she's trying to keep us quiet so we won't tell what we saw. I mean, her house, her garden, and all the other strange things," Matilda interfered. Ferry shook his head. "I think she would have found a way to stop us back then. I don't know what she wants from me." "So what did she whisper in your ear at the grocery store?" asked Matilda. Ferry could still hear in his head that clear melodic voice, whispering like in a dream. "She said, 'Come to me,'" he answered with a sudden shiver. Matilda snorted. "She's not expecting you to go to her creepy house again, is she?" That question stayed with Ferry all day long. Even when he went to bed, the question still echoed in his head. Should he go to the forgotten garden again? He almost fell asleep when a faint hissing woke him up. He thought maybe it was his raven. He was missing again. Ferry went to the window, but the nest was empty. Yet there was something else that caught his eye. A whirlwind of silver leaves and petals, wriggling and twisting in front of his window. He watched it like in a daze, unable to take his eyes away from it. Then he saw the shadow dripping on the frozen ground, close to the walnut tree. He could clearly see her standing there, looking with her chin up, straight at him. Lavender Sky, as still as a statue, the wind playing with her long veil. With a trembling hand, he opened the window. The whirlwind of flowers and leaves was getting closer. Whispers he couldn't understand came from all over, carried away by the wind. And when the shimmering flowers clashed against his window, exploding in thousands of petals, he could finally understand the whispers echoing to him clearly, in the voice of the veiled lady. "Come to me.